Hello everyone, welcome back to this online course delivered by Equate Scotland. We are delighted to be delivering this course in partnership with Skills Development Scotland. The course covers different aspects of the business and moral case for embedding ED&I measures in practice. What are the common pitfalls within recruitment processes and how they can be addressed through inclusion measures, and what are other measures to consider when embedding inclusive working practices within an organization. Before we dive in, I'd like to highlight that even though the focus of this course is on inclusive recruitment, for small medium enterprises, we will also cover other areas that are critical to enhance our understanding of the context in which the organization is recruiting. We will use this approach from a point of view of equality, diversity, and inclusion, and therefore will explain some of the key terminology and concepts that businesses need to be aware of. The course is split into three main areas. In part one, we covered why is it important to consider the key drivers of equality and diversity and inclusion within businesses. In part two, we looked at inclusive recruitment practices, and this section will be about how does equality, diversity, and inclusion go beyond recruitment. In this video, we will focus on the importance of workplace culture, inclusive leadership principles, and strategies on how SMEs can get started. The importance of workplace culture. What is the definition of organizational culture? Organizational culture is the way that things are done in an organization, the unwritten rules that influence individual and group behaviors and attitudes. Factors which can influence organizational culture include the organization's structure, the system and processes by which work is carried out, and the behavior and attitudes of employees, the organization's values and traditions, and the management and the leadership styles adopted. Hall developed the iceberg theory of culture, which states that the viewed, observed, and experienced parts of the culture constitute 10% of the entire cultural context of society. Therefore, 90% of the culture is invisible and made up of beliefs and perspectives in the minds of individual members of the society. Cultural makeup within the context of organizations, there's three dimensions to culture makeup, and the three dimensions of the cultural iceberg are made up of subjective and objective components. There is the cultural makeup that is visible, cultural makeup we are aware of, and cultural makeup we are unaware of. Strategy, leadership, and culture are like the three fundamental pillars that define the success of any organization. An effective leader should be able to drive a culture of inclusion and align that with the business growth strategy. So let's take an example. What happens when we don't think below the surface? So visibly, we can look at there's something going around flexible working policy. But when you look at the invisible elements of the culture, what we can see is this negativity towards the process. There's lack of confidence whether it's going to work. There's lack of role modeling, and there's lack of clarity in the process itself, and also unsure of the method, how can this method be pursued. And what happens when we don't think below the surface? There's other things that happen. There might be greater diversity, for example, through recruitment, but there's very low retention and progression rates. So if the culture of the organization is not inclusive, there's no point going for diversity hiring if we are not able to support and retain that staff. Organizations promoting the diversity credentials but not reviewing internal cultural practices, so doing it for the optics but not really applying that learning in their own practices. Organizations participating in diversity and inclusion weeks but having no inclusive activities for the rest of the year, again doing it for the optics. And then staff networks exist within the organization but they have no influence on the business objectives. So no matter how strong your policy or strategy is, you need a powerful and empowering culture. And you can say all the right things, but if on the ground the lived experience does not add up to what you say, people very quickly recognize that your organization is not authentic. So in a sense, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the key takeaways is every organization has a culture, whether we want it or not, or aware of it or not, and it's created by the behaviors we tolerate. Culture is not static; it does not stay still. A good culture is key to retaining staff. We have to trust the foundations of strong cultures. People need to feel safe, and culture change starts at the top. Leaders need to recognize they are a voice, but not the voice, which leads on to next slide around leadership and what does inclusive leadership look like. So before we touch on inclusive leadership, just a quick scan of what traditional leadership has been about. So traditional leadership has been about focusing more on the position of the business in the market and its competitiveness. It's more the business is the driver of the focus, where with the traditional leadership approach, the leader would encourage people to do the jobs by providing them the direction, support, and guidance to achieve organizational objectives, which are usually developed and filtered top down. Inclusive leadership. What does inclusive leadership look like? So inclusive leadership is a form of service leadership where the leader focuses on the people in the organization and everything else follows. There are a number of traits attributed to an inclusive leader. Being caring, open, honest, and authentic are some of those foundational qualities. A key attribute in this mix is a leader with cultural intelligence. Drawing from the cultural iceberg theory, we know that every organization has a culture. A culture is directed or defined by the decisions being made at the senior leadership level. An inclusive leader has the cultural intelligence and foresight to create equitable workspaces, viewing practical solutions through what we call an intersectional lens. So to create and embed an inclusive culture, leaders should consider different dimensions of their employees' and clients' identities, for which intersectionality is an important framework to consider. Intersectionality provides us the lens to understand that identities and marginalizations experienced are complex and multifaceted, where inclusion and diversity are not considered in a segmented but a holistic manner. An inclusive culture will recognize different intersectional barriers presented to people from minoritized genders, minoritized ethnicities, disabilities, and or other marginalized protected characteristics. An inclusive culture will also create safe spaces for staff to be able to discuss those different barriers alongside embedding ED&I policies and practice throughout different functions and stages within the organization, including the recruitment stage. So how can organizations, small, medium enterprises get started? Well, the first caveat is one size does not fit all. You need to determine why you're looking to do this. What is your rationale for looking at your ED&I landscape and your culture? And each company has a different view on this based on the culture and leadership. Then you have to assess the current picture to define the best course of actions. What are the elements you have? What are the stakeholders you have? Who are your allies? Who are your stewards? Who can you use or receive help from to embed some of the measures you're looking to change? Encourage challenging conversations internally. So this is about creating safe spaces, as we spoken earlier, that people from diverse and divergent backgrounds with intersectional identities are able to speak out and provide solutions. Set some initial and specific targets and goals. If you're looking to make change, you need to be able to measure it. So you need to be able to track your change, and for that, you need to set targets and goals. And think about evaluation from the beginning, because if you're wanting to know whether these measures are going to be impactful, you need to know you need to be able to measure them and see the difference and see if the outcomes are what you're looking for, and create a plan, review, and adjust over time. So this plan, of course, is created in partnership with the other stakeholders within the organization, and make sure that the plan itself is separate from individuals and roles. So if people leave and go, the plans don't fall by the wayside. These plans are still reviewed as part of internal processes and are adjusted and fed back into in a timely manner regularly. So we've heard about SMEs being constrained in terms of competing with bigger organizations, and there are kind of key reasons for that. We know that within the STEM market, SMEs can't compete with larger organizations on the basis of their wages. There's also limited brand visibility because of resources, and underrepresented groups just don't apply. and there's not enough women within STEM skills in the current kind of job market. So the STEM pipeline itself doesn't have enough women in. We also hear that salary is not the only consideration when we're looking for a job, which we also discussed. There's other kind of ways of encouraging candidates to apply. We now know that career progression is an important aspect of attracting talent. So perhaps focusing on elements on career progression within your work environment and within your organization. People also want to make an impact at work, which is so how do you recognize people creating, how do you create spaces where people's work can be recognized and the impact they're making can be valued and recognized? And how flexible is your workplace? Very flexible working policies are attracting candidates. So how are you embedding those in your workplace and your culture? So the opportunities for SMEs is you can implement change quicker because of your size. You're also able to offer career development pathways due to a range of roles and responsibilities, and smaller functions or not non-existing functions, which means people can take on new roles, create new roles. You can also engage with employees by offering shares and equity stakes, and you can create a close and more personal relationship with candidates because of smaller teams and a closer environment. And in addition to the kind of conventional routes, we would recommend you consider different pathways to bring in talent. So whether it's through programs like apprenticeship, paid internships, student placements, graduate programs, returners programs, career changers, remote workers, and also working with existing employees. So we are now at the end of our course, and we'd like to conclude with diversity does not mean inclusion. Organizations need to consider the company's culture to ensure greater diversity throughout recruitment is combined with good retention rates. Thank you for watching, and we hope this journey of learning on inclusive recruitment has provided you with some solutions to apply within your own organizations.